My name is Amanda. I married my childhood friend Frank, whom I had been dating since high school 6 months ago. I had known Frank's family for a long time, as we had known each other since childhood. I was able to get married without too much anxiety. We had known each other since childhood, so we had many friends in common. We were blessed to have so many people at our wedding, and I know that Frank and I will continue to support each other for the rest of our lives. That's what I swore in my heart. A few months after getting married, I became pregnant with a child of my beloved Frank. I was at the peak of happiness. And that's not all we were thankful for. Frank's mother supported us almost every day. We lived together in Frank's parents' house after getting married. Frank, being the only son, was well taken care of by his parents. That's why he expressed a desire for us to live together when we got married. Since I didn't particularly dislike my in-laws, I readily agreed to cohabitate. We moved in together the day after the wedding. I loved doing chores with my mother-in-law and talking books with my father-in-law. Even when I reported my pregnancy, they were so happy that they shed tears as if it were their own. When I tried to do something around the house, "It's okay, Amanda. I'll do it." She says so and took the lead in doing all the household chores. "Mom, I'm feeling really fine today, so it's okay." Even when I said that, "It's fine, it's fine. You have an important little one in your belly. Amanda, take a proper rest and prioritize the baby in your belly." She would stop me whenever I tried to do anything. I was genuinely happy that she cared about me, and her concern was appreciated. However, if I couldn't do anything at home, I would end up with too much free time. I used to work part-time, but as soon as I found out about the pregnancy, my mother-in-law recommended quitting immediately. Frank, my husband, also thought it was a good idea, so I ended up quitting my job. That's why, without the ability to do household chores at home, I really had nothing to do. "Mom, I feel like moving a bit, so I'll go shopping. Is there anything you want me to buy?" When I asked, No. Shopping involves carrying things, so I'll go. Even if you want to move, you're not in the stable period yet. You need a rest now." She wouldn't even allow me to leave the house like that. I know my mother-in-law is worried about me, but truth be told, enduring such days is becoming suffocating. My mother-in-law kept her job when she was pregnant with Frank. She has a history of being hospitalized due to a threatened miscarriage. It seemed like she was worried about me not going through the same. If I tried to move even a little, "It would be tough if you ended up hospitalized like me, right?" She said that, stopping me. As you can imagine, I didn't want to get into an awkward situation by talking back to my mother-in-law. I decided to rest as I was told until I was in stable condition. Once I was stable, my mother-in-law started allowing me to go for walks in the neighborhood, and I was able to go outside, although only on my husband's days off from work. We bought snacks at the supermarket, had picnics during walks, and occasionally went shopping with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law started cooking meals together with me after I entered the stable period. During the early stages of pregnancy, I thought she was genuinely just expressing concern. Then, at 38 weeks, while I was climbing the stairs at home, my water broke, and both my husband, Frank, and father-in-law were at work, so my mother-in-law drove me to the hospital. My mother-in-law handled all the communication with my husband, and when our son was safely born, my husband had already rushed to the hospital. First, my husband held our son.
"Oh, he's so adorable,"
Saying that, my husband gazed at our son with tears in his eyes, cherishing him. Watching this, tears welled up in me somehow.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm truly happy.
Saying this, my husband looked at me and smiled, which made me cry too. Can I come in? My mother-in-law, who had been so considerate as to stay outside my hospital room, came in to see me.
Mom, you should hold him too. He's seriously adorable.
Saying that, my husband handed our son to my mother-in-law. I felt somewhat embarrassed. My mother-in-law, who had cherished me and eagerly awaited her first grandchild. I wonder what she would say when she sees the long-awaited son. Thinking about it, I felt restless. Thanks to you, Mom, I was able to give birth safely. I really appreciate it. When I said that to my mother-in-law, who was holding our son, she uttered words I hadn't imagined. He doesn't resemble him at all. Huh? I inadvertently asked again. Mom, not resembling who? I'm saying he doesn't resemble Frank. Is he really Frank's child? What is she talking about? Originally, this should have been a time enveloped in happiness, with the birth of a child with the person I love. Yet for some reason, my heart couldn't catch up with the current situation, and I felt a strong pounding in my chest.
Mom, what are you saying?
Instantly, my husband retorted to his mother, but she continued without apologizing. Frank, take a look for yourself. Compare it to your childhood photos. They don't look anything alike, do they? Saying that, my mother-in-law showed us a picture of Frank as a newborn that she had on her phone. No, it's not like they're completely identical. As I said that, Amanda, be quiet. A child whose parentage is unknown like this? I can't accept it. Saying that, she left the hospital room.
Hey, Mom.
And for some reason, even my husband followed my mother-in-law out of the room. I was left behind, and I saw the face of my son in my arms. Tears welled up in my eyes. Even his eyes, ear shape, and eyebrows looked so much like Frank's. In the end, Frank never came back to the hospital room after that. On my messaging app,
I'm worried about Mom, so I'm going home with her.
I received only that message. I couldn't believe Frank's attitude at that time. But immediately after childbirth, I couldn't blame him. About a week passed, the day of discharge. Frank came to pick me up, but he seemed low-spirited for some reason. What's wrong? It's the day of discharge, and we can live together from today. As I peered into his face, my husband didn't seem happy at all. Moreover,
Mom is still in a bad mood. Try not to provoke her too much.
He says something incomprehensible like that. Even though I had just given birth and was physically and mentally exhausted, why do I have to be considerate of my mother-in-law on the day I was discharged? While thinking about that, I couldn't say it to my husband, and the car ride was silent. Even after returning to my in-laws' house, the awkward atmosphere didn't disappear. Rather, right after coming back, my mother-in-law said, "Oh, you're back? Or rather, you managed to come back." I was told such a sarcastic remark. My father-in-law glanced over to see what my mother-in-law had said to me and immediately looked away. I restrained the feeling of wanting to cry. Mom, I've said it many times, but this child is Frank's. His name is Brody. Won't you please show him some affection? I appealed like so. However, my mother-in-law completely ignored it. Hey, Frank, say something too. I appealed to my husband.
Well, the fact is, he doesn't look like me.
He said it so casually. For some reason, I stopped crying at that moment. It was the moment when my husband, who was supposed to protect me, abandoned me. Thinking back, even that day when I gave birth, if it were true my husband should have properly told my mother-in-law and convinced her. And yet, in the end, my husband believed what his mother told him. He took his mother's side. I felt empty, and since that day I gave up on expecting my mother-in-law to show affection to my son. My husband too showed no signs of participating in childcare. My stress increased day by day. "Can you give the baby some milk? I want to take a bath." When I made the request,
"I've just come back from work. Why should I sacrifice sleep when I don't even know if the child is mine?"
he started saying such terrible things. Unbelievable. I'm done. Saying that, I prepared the milk myself and quickly went into the bath the moment the babies fell asleep. I lived those days like that. I honestly thought that if the only one denying it was my mother-in-law, I would have done a DNA test or something to confront her with the evidence. However, even my supposed strongest ally, my husband, didn't believe that the child was his. The pain of my mother-in-law not believing my son was her grandson was nothing compared to the agony of my husband not supporting me. But my parents moved far away to the countryside at my father's insistence when I got married. Originally, my parents, who wanted to live in a naturally abundant place, went far away right after I got married, so I couldn't rely on them very quickly. Moreover, they were genuinely happy for me. They also adored Frank like a real son and trusted him. That's why I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents about this incident. One day, after months of silence, my mother-in-law approached me despite ignoring me whenever I tried to talk.
"Amanda, can I talk to you for a moment? Can you come to the living room with your child?"
Okay. My mother-in-law, who had ignored me and paid no attention to my son until now, might apologize for everything. At least that's what I thought. However, my expectations were quickly shattered. When I entered the living room, my mother-in-law and husband were sitting. Then she said to me,
"Can't you take that child and leave?"
"Huh?" I was suddenly thrown off balance and my head couldn't catch up with what was happening. In my bewilderment, my mother-in-law stared at my son and said,
"There's no sign of him resembling us, even though he's been born for quite a while. I've had enough."
Saying that, she glared at our son, and my husband remained silent in response. Seeing that, everything somehow felt absurd to me. I gathered my resolve. Understood. If it's come to this, I'll leave. I'll pack my things and go. Saying so, I signed the divorce agreement and returned to the room. I began to pack my belongings. Even seeing me like that, my husband said nothing, engaging in a cheerful conversation with my mother-in-law. "Please pay child support." When I said that,
"How can you do that when it might not be Frank's kid?"
I was told by my mother-in-law. Feeling irritated, I didn't retort and left the house, heading to my parents' place. When I explained everything to my parents, they were puzzled at first, but they gladly accepted and decided to take care of me until I found a job and saved enough money. Of course, I sought child support from my ex-husband through a lawyer, but it was never transferred. Personally, I had no desire to deal with my ex-husband and in-laws again, so I didn't pursue the child support further. Several years later, when my son turned 6, I received a call from a local friend who knew about Frank, informing me that Frank had passed away in a traffic accident. Of course, I heard about it soon after his passing, but I didn't want to be involved, and my son was going through a busy and active phase, so I didn't attend the funeral. A few months later, I happened to be back in my hometown for the first time in several years when I was invited to get together with some local friends. I wanted to buy a souvenir before going to a friend's house. My son and I went to a department store where we used to go as a family.
"Amanda?"
Upon hearing her call, I turned around to find my mother-in-law, whom I hadn't seen in years. As I stood frozen, she quickly approached us.
"Is this Brody?"
Saying so, she spoke to my son.
"Brody, I'm your grandmother. You really look just like Frank."
She began making such remarks. Unable to endure my mother-in-law's statement, I separated my son from her and said, "Please, stop this now. Because of you, When I said that, my mother-in-law responded.
Don't get so angry. I've wanted to meet you for a long time.
She conveniently mentioned this, and feeling like I might explode with anger, I said, "Excuse me." I took my son's hand and left the scene.
Is she my grandma now?
My son asked, and although I had concealed it until now, my son, now in elementary school, seemed genuinely curious. He kept asking me as I stumbled with my words.
Grandma is Mom's mom, right? Who is that person?
Unable to hide it any longer, I explained briefly to my son when we got home. Upon hearing that, my son said,
Mom, you've worked so hard. You're amazing.
Saying that, he patted my head. Touched by my son's kindness, tears welled up, and I genuinely felt that giving birth to this child was the right decision. Several months later, I was already living in an apartment with my son after moving out from my parents' house. My mother-in-law came to visit me. "Why are you here?" I asked, and she responded,
Frank had mutual friends here, right? After asking around a lot, I finally found you.
Saying so, she forcefully entered the house. "Please stop, leave," I said, and she replied,
Frank passed away in an accident, and my husband also died of an illness. You and my family are the only ones left.
Saying this, she pleaded as if she were the tragic heroine. Then, either because of her loud voice or something else, my son came out from the next room. Seeing my son, my mother-in-law said,
Brody, let's live together, okay? I'll buy you lots of delicious things in a bigger house than this one.
Saying that, she patted my son's head. "Please, stop," I said, and my mother-in-law took out a thick envelope and said,
There's $35,000 as child support so far. My family is only you two now, so please, live with me.
Saying this, she handed me the envelope. Then she turned to my son and said,
Brody, I'm your grandma. I want to live with you, Brody. I'll buy you lots of things you like, right?
Saying so, she smiled. In this situation, I felt tears welling up. Now the feeling of what's happening now, and the uncertainty of whether it's okay to take away my son's grandmother left me in a tangled mess of emotions. I found myself at a loss for words. And then,
I'm not going, okay? Huh?
My mother-in-law sounded dumb when my son said that.
Brody? What are you talking about? You can live with your grandmother, you know? There are lots of delicious things, and I'll buy you plenty of toys, too.
Despite my mother-in-law's desperate attempts to persuade,
I don't want it, 'cause you were mean to Mom, right? My only grandma is Mom's mom.
Saying this, Brody waved off his grandmother and sat beside me. My mother-in-law seemed to despair as she fell silent, and after staring for a while, she suddenly stood up and left without a word. Since that day, there has been no contact from my mother-in-law. Of course, she never came to visit. The child support my mother-in-law left has been saved for my son, and I haven't touched it yet. When I consulted about this with my parents,
He wasn't paying child support, so why not?
I was grateful and decided to take it. I don't know how my mother-in-law has been doing since then. Frankly, it doesn't matter to me right now, because I have such a strong son by my side. My son who protected me from my mother-in-law at a very young age. My son who chose me without being deceived by my mother-in-law's sweet temptations. I love my son from the bottom of my heart. Until now, and of course in the future as well, I want to take responsibility to ensure my son can be happy even without a father. I want to continue raising him.